Why is Roger Federer the most beloved tennis player of the 21st century? And one of the most beloved tennis players of all time. He wasn't the winningest player of all time. That is Djokovic. He doesn't come from a large country with lots of fans. He comes from Switzerland, a small country known for their extreme modesty. He isn't the most handsome player. That is either Grigor Dimitrov, Tommy Paul, Holger Rune, or Taylor Fritz, depending on who you ask. When you ask tennis fans who is the greatest of all time, Roger Federer is usually the first name that comes to mind. When ESPN ranked the top 10 men's tennis players of the 21st century, they ranked Federer first, even though he has fewer majors than Nadal and Djokovic and has a losing record to both of them. This does not make any sense from an objective standpoint. And yet, most tennis fans agree that he was the greatest. And that reputation as the greatest has translated to off-the-court success. He was voted tennis fans' favorite player an astonishing 19 years in a row, from 2003 to 2021. He is the 9th highest paid athlete of all time in any sport, and the only tennis player in the top 25. He is one of the very few athletes with over $1 billion in career earnings. Roger Federer is a conundrum. And I'll spoil the answer for you right here. One trait sets Federer apart. If I could distill it down to one word, it would be play. He played the game of tennis, not just in the sense of competing, but with a childlike joy and creativity, even on the biggest stages. While his rivals strained with intensity or machine-like precision, Federer often wore a relaxed smile, tried audacious shots, and seemed to be having fun. In this episode, we explore how Federer's playfulness made him great. How did a hot-headed kid from Basel, Switzerland, who once hid in a tree to avoid tennis practice, grow up to dominate the tennis world with grace and joy? And what does his story teach us about staying true to our nature, about maintaining joy, fluidity, and creativity, even in fierce competition? We'll see how a playful mindset helped Roger Federer take over the tennis world and how we might do the same in ours. Welcome to How to Take Over the World.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
This was our finest hour.
I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.
Hello, and welcome to How to Take Over the World. This is Ben Wilson. Federer is my favorite tennis player. I love watching him play. He's a great champion. I'm really excited for this episode. It's based on the book The Master, The Long Run and Beautiful Game of Roger Federer by Christopher Clarey, as well as a few other interviews and profiles that I found online. Federer is a great athlete, a great champion, and I think so far has lived a beautiful and admirable and enviable life. So I'm really excited for this episode. I hope you enjoy it as well. Let's get straight into it. This is Roger Federer. This episode is brought to you by Gains in Bulk. I study great performance for a living, from conquerors to tennis champions. And as you might imagine, I'm always trying to lock in my own peak performance. And in that pursuit, the only supplement that I take every single day is instantized creatine from Gains in Bulk. Instantized creatine is the only form of creatine that is water soluble. That means no chalky taste, no bloat, no water retention like you get with some other creatines. So give it a try. You won't regret it. I really believe that creatine is one of the only supplements you can really trust to improve not only your performance in the gym and your athletic performance, but also your mental performance and mental clarity. So check it out. That is Gains in Bulk. You can find them at gainsinbulk.com and use code BEN for 20% off. Roger Federer was born in Basel, Switzerland in 1981. He came from an upper middle class family. His father was Swiss and his mother was actually South African. From the start, he was an active child, close to hyperactive, he later said. I didn't like school much, Roger recalls. My parents had to push me very hard. What truly captured his attention was any activity involving a ball. Soccer, tennis, basketball, you name it. When his father was recalling what life was like around the house with Roger Federer in the home, he said simply, boom, boom, boom. There was always a ball bouncing off of some surface, whether he was kicking a soccer ball or bouncing a tennis ball with a racket. He simply loved to play. And that theme, loving to play, defined Federer's childhood. He wasn't forced into hyper-specialization early on. In fact, tennis was just one of the many sports that he enjoyed. He enjoyed badminton, squash, basketball, soccer, any game available. His one requirement for sports was that they have a ball. He would later say, I'm not a big fan of running, of swimming, of riding the bike. There's got to be a ball somewhere. And that's because Federer is someone, again, who likes to play. He wants sports to be enjoyable. He didn't like the sort of grinding, boring nature of endurance sports. And this variety helped Federer, stay playful, enjoy sports. He did not specialize early. Eventually, around age 12, Roger chose tennis over soccer, deciding that he had, quote, more talent in my hands than in my feet, and preferring a sport where victory or defeat was in his own control versus a team sport where he had to rely on others. This is relatively late compared to prodigies like the Williams sisters or Andre Agassi, who specialized very early on, but it is in line with others from his own generation, like Novak Djokovic, who was a gifted downhill skier and didn't give it up until quite late, and very similar to Rafael Nadal, who, like Federer, was an extremely gifted soccer player and didn't end up giving up the sport until 12 years old, the same age as Federer. Federer's parents supported him, but they didn't micromanage him at all. They let the coaches do the coaching. They supported him by going to matches and cheering him on, but they actually never attended practice. His mother said it was his choice to focus on tennis, and they didn't push him. Quote, "We wanted it to be Roger's decision. We were very much in the supporting role, and I think that was one of the reasons he stayed with it and persevered, because it was his decision." And look, like I said, there are multiple ways to do it, right? The Williams sisters specialized early on, so did Agassi. Sampras specialized early on. So I do think that is one viable path to greatness. However, it is worth pointing out that all those tennis players who I just mentioned, who specialized early, all of them have had tortured relationships with the game that gave them their fame and their fortune. Agassi has written in his autobiography extensively about hating tennis for long stretches of time. Similarly, the Williams sisters have had, they enjoyed tennis. So did Agassi, so did Sampras. But, Sampras retired early. The Williams sisters definitely were hot and cold with tennis because they burned out early and it wasn't always enjoyable. Whereas all those who I mentioned specialized late and did not have oppressive parents, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, all seemed to have a very healthy relationship with the sport of tennis and enjoyed it much more than the others. So Roger is playing tennis as well as other sports early. From the beginning, those around Roger noticed two things: incredible talent, just a phenomenal athlete, and hyperactivity. I think you would call him ADD. At age 8, he started training at a local club called Old Boys Basel under coach Madeline Barlocker. And he was a joker and a prankster. He was difficult to keep on task. However, it was obvious from very early on that he was extremely talented. And despite his distractibility, he did have drive as well. Barlocker, that first coach, would later say, even at age 8, Roger was joking around with his friends that he was going to be number 1. The other great attribute of Federer is that he is an incredible learner. Barlocker said, "One day another coach came to me and said that he had never had a junior who could apply his advice so quickly. Some students try it and it takes maybe a week or two, but Roger could just do it." Another coach, Sven Gronefeld, said, quote, "Roger is really good at mimicking things. Amazing, actually." And that is something we see from so many greats, right? Alexander Hamilton, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Picasso, they all learn and incorporate feedback incredibly quickly. And this is the other thing that we see, is that emulation is the most efficient and lasting form of learning. That is why Caesar tried to be like Alexander, Napoleon tried to be like Caesar, Steve Jobs was trying to be Edwin Land. Emulation is the best form of learning. As Machiavelli says, you must do as those eminent men before you have done, who elected to imitate someone who had been praised and honored before you, and always keep in mind his deeds and actions. And in fact, Roger Federer, despite the fact that he's kind of ADD, he's not a good student, he loved the history of tennis. He loved studying the greats. He loved studying, John McEnroe and Rod Laver and Borg and all these guys. So he definitely did that as well. In fact, people commented on how much Roger's strokes resembled those of his first great coach, Peter Carter, because he learned through mimicry, through emulation. So if emulation was Roger's superpower, his fatal flaw was his temper. He hated losing. Okay, reading now from the master. Quote, "I was a terrible loser. I really was," Federer said. Barlocker remembers him losing at an interclub match at Old Boys and sitting under the umpire's chair and crying long after everyone else had left the court. Usually when we had these team matches, then we also eat something together, and we were already eating sandwiches, and he wouldn't come, Barlocker said. So half an hour later, I had to go get him underneath that umpire chair, and he was still there crying. So he's incredibly emotional. He's incredibly temperamental. So if you're putting together a list of ingredients that makes Federer at this young age, you have talent, hyperactivity, mimicry, and extreme competitiveness and sensitivity to loss. There was one more thing, which was his playfulness. He was a practical joker. He liked to try out various trick shots. He was very social and liked to banter with and gently tease his teammates. And that is an odd combination. How do you combine someone who loves to play with someone who hides under a chair and cries for an hour after losing a match? One coach described it. He said, "I saw how stubborn he was and also how playful he was. Very, very playful." And then, someone asks him, well, how could someone so temperamental possibly be playful? And he responds, "Competitively playful is how I describe him at this stage. Everything was a game, whether it was on the court, off the court, or in conversation. And still today, if you have a casual conversation with him, just having a guy's talk, there's always an element of competition to it, whether it's a joke or more serious. But because of his playfulness, it was hard for him to keep his concentration and to really stick to one thing in those days. He needed a lot of variety. And if you didn't give him variety, he would become a nuisance." Okay? So I really like that formulation. Competitively playful. I think that's a winning mindset. Now, in those days, that competitiveness more often than not came out as these epic, embarrassing tirades, screaming, yelling, crying. And his father was one person who deserves some credit in helping him overcome that. And as we've said, his parents generally did not try to intrude into his career. And the impression that I get is that they were not very strict parents, generally speaking. But his son's tirades would get so bad that Roger Federer, that's his father, had to step in a couple of times. During one practice match as a kid, Roger's father got so fed up with his son's tantrums and disrespect that he placed a 5-franc coin on the bench and said, "Find your own way home." He wasn't going to drive him home. Another time, Robert literally stopped the car after a tournament and rubbed Roger's head in the snow to cool him off from a post-match tirade. So he had lost this match, he was screaming, crying, gets in the car, is still just ranting and raving about this match and screaming. So Robert says, this is Switzerland, it's the winter, it's freezing, there's snow outside. He gets out of the car, grabs his head, and starts rubbing in the snow. Okay? So I am generally not in favor of harsh parenting. My parents almost never punished me as a child, and I think they were great parents, best I've ever had. I think if you are correcting your child every day and constantly rubbing their head in the snow and telling them off, then the relationship is just bad. It's negative, right? And your kid learns to tune you out. But the fact that Roger Federer rarely reprimanded his son means that when he did put his foot down, when he did tell him, "Find your own ride home," or rubbed his head in the snow, it really got through to him. So this is, something that helps moderate that temper. Even so, this is very limited, and his temper would be a problem well into his early professional career. By his early teens, Roger's talent demanded a bigger venue, so at 14, he left home to train at Switzerland's National Tennis Center. This was in Ecublens, the French-speaking part of Switzerland. And this is difficult because Roger is from the German-speaking part of Switzerland and spoke almost no French. Bonjour, merci, that's it. He spoke as much French as me. So Federer arrives, he doesn't speak the language. It's the first time away from home. He's living on his own by himself at age 14, which is going to be difficult anyway. And it was a very difficult time for him. Bullying might be too strong a word, but he does say, quote, "I was the Swiss German kid that everyone was making fun of." So it's good for his tennis career. These are the best coaches in Switzerland. But socially, it's very difficult. He counted down the days when he could return home to Basel and speak German, be with his family, and be in a comfortable environment once again. Ironically, he also faced criticism back home for this. Switzerland is a country that is almost pathologically focused on reserve, on humility, on going with the flow and not standing out. Federer tells a funny story about going to the dentist after moving to Ecublens. So he's full-time in Ecublens doing tennis during the week, and then on weekends he would come home. So he's home one weekend, the dentist is working on his teeth, and here's what happens, reading from the master. Federer faced skepticism almost immediately after his decision to leave school. When he visited his regular dentist in Basel, the conversation began, as many conversations with dentists do, in the middle of a cleaning. He's in my mouth, and he's like, "So what are you doing now?" Federer remembered. And I say, "I'm playing tennis." And he's like, "That's it? Just tennis?" Federer changed dentists. Quote, "I never went back because I just felt like he's not really understanding what I'm trying to do here," Federer told me. "I'm chasing a dream. I'm trying to aim for the stars, and he's trying to pull me back. And you know what? I don't want to be surrounded by people like this." It was an approach that Federer carried forward with him as he built his own professional and private circles. He valued positive energy and people who empowered him. Okay? I think that's an amazing story. He's trying to do something here. He's trying to go out on a limb and become a professional tennis player. And when someone doesn't believe in that, he's ready to just send them, out of his orbit, including even his dentist. One of the reasons I love this story is because it reminds me of the founder of Polaroid, Edwin Land. Go back and check out that episode if you haven't. And here's what one Polaroid executive said about Land. Quote, "One thing about Land, when he is doing something wild and risky, he is careful to insulate himself from anyone who's critical. It's very easy in the early stages to have a dream exploded. He's very persistent, and he's protective of his persistence. If somebody wants to come around, wants to tell him why it won't work, and he perceives that simply as discouragement of himself, he will throw him out." Okay? So protecting belief is crucial, especially early on. And Ecublens was a difficult place in many ways, but it was a place where people believed in him. Everyone here is trying to become a professional, trying to become a great tennis player. And so that was kind of a bubble of belief. Well, at Ecublens, like I said, Roger needed variety, right? Or else he could become a nuisance. And so the solution was to give him variety. And that became the training regimen for kind of everyone, okay? The director there said, "I'm not saying that Roger was driving our entire group, but because it was a group stationed in one national tennis center, Roger could be the disruptor. So we had to tailor the entire group to a lot of variety." Right? So clearly, the directors here at this tennis center in Switzerland see his talent if they're willing to sort of set the agenda around his need for variety. At Ecublens, he also learned French in a matter of months. The way he did this was, he was very playful, he was very social, he loved talking to people. And so he would just try and talk in French and make lots of mistakes along the way, but he didn't really care. And that is just a great way to learn a language. A great way to learn anything, right? Is to not have that fear of making mistakes. And Roger really approached tennis that way. He was very experimental, very playful, and so made lots of mistakes. That would be true actually well into his career. If you look at his matches with someone like Nadal or Djokovic, he always had more errors. Against anyone really. He had more errors than his opponent, but he would also just have more winners. And so he took that approach in tennis. He took that approach in learning a language of I'm just going to try. I know I'm going to make mistakes, but that's how I'm going to learn. So he's making mistakes, but he's learning and he's getting really good. This tennis center is great for his development because Basel, it's not a big town. It's not a big city, I should say. And so he can only progress so much with that level of talent. But at the tennis center in Ecublens, he's with the best tennis players in Switzerland. And so can progress more playing against that level of competition. He still has this dual nature, though. His coaches saw unlimited potential. There's one story from his time there that I love. I'll read now. Quote, "The Federation had a strict rule not to damage an expensive new indoor court backdrop. During a frustrating practice, Roger hurled his racket, and it sliced right through the curtain like a hot knife through butter, leaving a huge slit. Caught red-handed, Roger thought he'd be expelled on the spot. Instead, Coach Peter Lundgren enforced a creative punishment. Roger had to wake up at dawn for a week to scrub toilets and clean the tennis center. The teenage Federer was notorious for sleeping in." Okay, so through these ups and downs, Roger's ability kept rising. By 16, he was one of the top junior players in the world. Not instantly the best. Interestingly, he didn't dominate the junior circuit until late. He lost plenty of junior finals and big matches along the way. But in 1998, the final year of his junior career, everything clicked. It's hard to say exactly why. Perhaps one reason is that he started working with a sports psychologist and was able to find a little bit more equilibrium on court. The sports psychologist was named Christian Marcoli, and he really worked on helping him channel his emotions. So that summer, Roger won the boys' singles title at Wimbledon, a huge breakthrough for a kid who had struggled to keep his cool in big moments. In the final, when a few things went wrong, he momentarily raged. He tossed his racket after a missed backhand, but then, amazingly, for one of the first times in his career, he reined himself back in and closed out the championship in straight sets. And so that ability to recover his focus after his emotions getting the best of him was really important to him kind of hitting the next level on his journey to tennis greatness. So in 1998, he finishes the year as the number one ranked junior in the world. He turned professional in 1999 at age 17. And those in the know in the tennis world were buzzing about his potential. But as with many prodigies, the transition to the pro tour was a really big adjustment. And actually, it's funny because it's so different from his reputation later on, but his reputation early on was as a hothead, as the guy who smashes rackets, yells at the at the referee, yells at the line judges, throws tantrums, cries. Like, that's who Federer was. He was talented, but he was not great. And no one thought of him as a great winner at this point. In 2001, at age 19, Roger Federer stunned the world by defeating the great Pete Sampras at Wimbledon. Okay, Pete Sampras had won more major tournaments than anyone else at this point in time. And Wimbledon was his tournament. It was where he played the best. And so to beat him there, for a 19-year-old is a huge deal. And this was like a passing the torch moment. Sampras, 7-time Wimbledon champion, still near his peak. And Federer is this upstart kid. It's a 5-set thriller, very difficult match. But his shot making prevailed, snapping Sampras's 31-match Wimbledon win streak. Okay, no one had been able to beat Sampras, and now Federer does it. And this makes him a sensation overnight. Now, before, people who knew kind of had their eye on Federer. Now casual tennis fans start saying, oh, okay, who's this Federer kid? And start tuning in. Despite that, because of just where he was in life, I guess, his emotionality, his, at this point, he's partying a lot, he's drinking a lot. He was like known for, you'd find him in the Players Clubhouse and he'd be like drunk after his match. So he's someone who can beat Sampras, one of the few people in the world who can beat Sampras at Wimbledon. And yet, in 2002, just a year later, he has a disastrous first round loss at Wimbledon to a man ranked 154th in the world. Okay. So, well-liked, has a lot of potential, but he's still very up and down. Okay. And not very focused. Definitely not focused in the way that's going to lead someone to be number one in the world and to be great. Okay. So that's kind of 2001, 2002, age 19, age 20, he's becoming very good. He's one of the most talented players on tour. His ranking is rising, but he's still very inconsistent, very up and down. He's not winning any major tournaments. In late 2002, a tragedy struck that would profoundly change him. So his first great coach was a guy named Peter Carter. And in late 2002, he dies in a car accident. And Carter had sort of been Roger's tennis father. Okay, he was a coach. He was the one whose strokes Roger emulated. When people talk about Roger Federer, they talk about his beautiful game, and he does. He has this very elegant game. His forehand, he has his one-handed backhand. It's just extremely fluid, extremely gracious. And he got this from Peter Carter. People who knew Peter said that Roger's game looked exactly like Peter's. Okay, so he has this very strong relationship with this guy, and he dies tragically in this car accident in late 2002. One friend described Roger's reaction. Quote, Roger was completely destroyed. You could see in his body language, and he could not stop crying. I think he cried for the whole funeral, an hour and a half straight. It was tough to see that kind of grief, but I really think Roger became a man at that moment of Peter's death. That's basically the first time he really had to face something tough or horrible. He was quickly in the top 100, quickly making good money. His family was healthy. His parents were together. Sure, he and his sister had some fights because he had money she didn't have or whatever, but that was not a big problem. He met Mirka and was happy there as well. So everything was going smoothly, and then he lost one of the most important people in his life. Okay, so it's a moment of enormous tragedy for Roger Federer. It's the first really difficult thing he faces. In the book, The Master describes his transformation after this. Quote, for Federer, the funeral was an epiphany. His evolution from talented prospect into one of the greatest players of all time involved many elements, but Carter's death was a major factor, perhaps the decisive factor. From that point on, Federer understood that his success validated Carter's efforts and honored his memory. Carter's life had been far too short, but at least if Federer could achieve what Carter had envisioned on court, then that life had served some part of its purpose. Okay? So that's just like, wow. That I didn't expect that at all going in. That this moment of tragedy would serve as the catalyst for his greatness, that he wanted to prove his coach right, basically, is one of the reasons that he got more serious about tennis and kind of locked in to becoming great. Remember in the John Williams episode, we talk about how he was a pretty good composer. He had directed the scores for a few big budget films, but nothing memorable. And then his wife dies very young, leaving him widowed with 3 young children. And he stops working for a few years. And then what happens? When he comes back, it is Jaws, Star Wars, E.T., Indiana Jones. Boom, 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 boom. Some of the greatest film scores of all time. He just immediately becomes the greatest film composer ever. For whatever reason, tragedy can be a huge catalyst for achievement. I think it focuses the mind on what's really important. I don't know. I've never been through that, but for whatever reason, it can do that, and that was the case for Roger Federer. Before Peter's death, he was a known talent, but in the tennis world, he was mostly known for his outbursts, for smashing rackets, for yelling at chair umpires, for crying after matches. And immediately after Peter's death, his career would take a drastic turn. In 2003, he calms down the tantrums and starts winning. This culminates in July when he beats Mark Philippoussis to win his first major. By the way, I should explain majors, okay? In tennis, you have lots of tournaments, and the tennis season is really long. So basically year-round, they're playing tennis tournaments. But there are 4 majors, okay? And those are Wimbledon, which is in the UK. It's just outside of London. So Wimbledon, the French Open, the US Open, and the Australian Open. Okay, and those are considered more or less championships. And these days, people are mostly evaluated based on the number of majors they win. Sometimes they're called Grand Slams. This is a little confusing, right? Because actually a Grand Slam is when you win all 4 majors. Okay, so if you win the French, the Wimbledon, the US Open, and the Aussie, that's considered a Grand Slam. But sometimes people refer to the tournaments individually as Grand Slams. Okay, anyway, this is his first Grand Slam victory, basically his first championship. And of course, Roger being Roger, after winning the match, he jumped, then fell to the grass and began crying. He's still very emotional. And by the way, with these tournaments, I should also explain, while I'm explaining the majors, Grand Slams, they have different surfaces. Okay, so the French is played on clay. Okay, clay is soft. You can slide on it. And so the play is slower. So it favors people who tend to stay back, play from the baseline, play defensively, get into long rallies. Wimbledon is played on grass, and grass plays extremely quickly. Okay, the ball hits and it skids, it skips, so everything goes fast. So that is an advantage for players who are big servers, who play fast and come to the net and try and finish points early. The US Open and the Australian Open, the Aussie, are played on hard court surfaces, okay, basically cement. And that is kind of in the middle, but it also probably leans more towards grass. Like, it is also a faster surface. So in the past, the greatest players tended to be those who played aggressively because they had a better shot at winning Wimbledon, US Open, and the Australian Open. Whereas people who had that kind of slower style of game tended to be more specialists. And you would have great players who would win the Australian Open, the US Open, and Wimbledon, like Pete Sampras, but never won a French Open because it was just difficult for him to compete on the slow surface of the clay at Roland Garros at the stadium in Paris. I guess while we're here, while I'm giving you background on tennis, I'm going to explain to you how tennis scoring works, okay? Because why not? Because when you're hearing it, it sounds good. It sounds like a weird upside down world Harry Potter scoring system, right? It's very crazy because you have games, sets, and matches, okay? And the games are scored very weird. You start at 0. If you win a point, it goes to 15. If you win another point, it goes to 30. If you win a third point, it goes to 40. And then when you win your 4th point, you win the game. And then you have to win 6 games in order to win the set. And typically you have to win 2 sets to win the match. So to win the game, to win your competition against your competitor, you have to win 2 sets. So you have to win 12 games in total. But in the major tournaments, in the French Open, the US Open, the Australian Open, and Wimbledon, for men only, you actually have to win 3 sets instead of 2. Okay, so that's like a little difficult to remember. But to make it make sense to you, I'll explain how tennis scoring came to be. And that was, tennis is a very old game. Okay? It was played in medieval times. So they didn't have scoreboards. So how are they going to keep score? Well, they kept score with a clock. All right? And so the way they kept score was the second hand kept track of the game, and then the minute hand kept track of the set. You had to do one revolution to win a game. So with the second hand, you win a point, they move it to 15. They move it 1/4 turn on the clock. You win another point, they move it to 30. If you win another point, they move it to 45. But over time, it takes too long to say 45, so they just shortened it to 40. Okay, so it's 15, 30, 45, and then you turn the second hand all the way around. Okay, you won the game. So now we move the minute hand over to 1. I guess it's the hour hand, right? You move it over to 1. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you're at the bottom of the clock. You won 1 set. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You won your second set. So the hour hand has gone all the way around the clock. Now you won the match. Okay, so they're keeping score with clocks. That's why this crazy system. Okay, so the second hand keeps track of the game, and then the hour hand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1 set, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 2 sets. Now you've won the match. All right, now you get it. That's how tennis scoring works. I hope that helped for you non-tennis fans. So Roger Federer has won his first Grand Slam tournament, has won his first major. He immediately becomes a phenomenon, not only because he's young and the best, but because, as we've said, of the grace of his game. Roger plays with an effortlessness that is rare in tennis. The game looks incredibly smooth when he's playing, though that can be a double-edged sword. After the victory, Federer would say, when I'm winning, everything seems so easy. And when I'm losing, it seems like, oh, this guy's not trying, but I'm always trying. And I gave everything I had these last 2 weeks. Okay, and he did. He was trying extremely hard now. He's working hard. For the first time in his life, he's really learning to work hard. Federer had been known for his talent and his lack of mental toughness. Well, now his mentality becomes one of his strengths. The Argentine player Guillermo Correa would joke that whoever did the work on Federer's head deserves the Nobel Prize. That's how big of a change it is for him to go from being this head case to being this great champion with this winning mentality. And this change would mark the start of one of the great runs in tennis history. This episode is brought to you by Founders. Founders is one of my favorite podcasts. You have limited time. There's only so much media that you can consume. Okay, you have trusted me with your well-earned time, and I appreciate that. It's meaningful to me. You should listen to Founders. It is one of the only podcasts that I listen to and think, wow, this is worth my time. I'm glad I did this. I learned so much from it. It's like How to Take Over the World, but specifically for and about great founders of companies. The host, David Senra, is a good friend, and he has at this point read hundreds of biographies of great founders. And so he's really, really good at extracting the best and most important and most pertinent lessons from every story. So I hope you'll check them out. That is Founders, wherever you get your podcasts. In 2004, Federer seized the #1 ranking and began one of the most dominant runs in tennis history. Over the next several years, he was nearly untouchable. From 2004 through 2007, Federer won 11 out of 16 possible Grand Slam titles, an astounding haul. And it's especially amazing when you consider that because of his style, which was more aggressive and attacking, the French, he never won during this run, and he wasn't really competitive. And so of the other Grand Slams, he won 11 out of 12. I mean, no one has had a run like this ever. 11 out of 12 when you're talking about Wimbledon, Australian Open, US Open. I mean, just completely dominant. It wasn't just slams. Seemingly every week he was lifting a new trophy. Andre Agassi, one of Federer's early rivals, once shook his head after facing Roger and said to a reporter, "Mate, our game has forever been changed. This guy is just taking the game to a whole new level. We haven't seen this type of level before." Agassi had played Sampras. He had played, the greats from the generation before that as well. He had seen it all, and he was saying Federer was beyond anything he had seen. Part of this magic was the fact that Federer could just hit every shot. He had a killer serve. It wasn't so much, he didn't have the fastest serve. His serve was never that fast, actually. But his serve was great for a few reasons. One is that, there are different things you can do with your serve. You can go down the line, you can go out wide, you can hit what's called a body serve. And depending on what you're going to do, most people have a different toss, right? So you might toss it a little wider if you're going to go down the line, because that allows you to kind of come in and hit it down the middle, or, whatever. And so if you are returning, you can look at the toss and then start to move based on how they toss it. Well, Federer can hit any serve with the same toss. So you never know where the serve is coming. He also, you can think of it like a pitcher in baseball. I don't know how to analogize it if you're not American, but in baseball, the pitcher is trying to throw the ball and the batter is trying to hit it. And you would think mostly they just try and throw fast, right? And they throw fastballs, but they have something called a changeup where they throw it. The only good thing about the ball is that it's slower because the batter is used to the timing of this fastball. And so when the changeup comes, he's not ready for the timing, it throws him off. Okay, this is Federer, right? He has the same toss every time. You never know where it's going. He always is changing up his serve, his pinpoint accuracy. He's always getting it right on the line on the inside and the outside. So his serve is not that fast, but everything else about it is perfect and just keeps the opponent really off balance, not knowing what to do or how to respond. So he's a great server. He's a good returner, not great. The greatest returner of all time is Djokovic. Federer is not that good, but he has a very good return. He's one of the great forehands of all time. Just this unbelievable forehand. It's extremely powerful, tons of topspin on it. And just, again, he's probably the best of all time with volleys. His touch at the net is just exceptional. He also, his one weakness that could be exploited sometimes was his backhand. He has, most players play with a two-handed backhand. And a two-handed backhand is more consistent, but is less powerful. And so he has this whipping one-handed backhand that was this extremely potent weapon. When he connects with it, it's the most beautiful shot in tennis, and it looks great, and it is great. It's an unbelievable weapon. But it was very inconsistent early on. With his backhands, you would see a massive shank that would put the ball in the stands like 25% of the time. Okay. Kind of an unacceptable amount of the time for a player at his level. And for that reason, he played defensively from the backhand side most of the time, and he would slice the ball back, which is not a powerful shot. It just keeps the ball low so that the other player can't attack that much with it. Okay. But he does have this weapon of a backhand, so he can do it all. Great serve, good returner, incredible at the net, impressive backhand, one of the greatest forehands of all time. And this versatility meant that Federer could play any style. He could serve and volley. He could play aggressive and come into the net and try to end points quickly. He could play from the baseline. And he wasn't a great baseline player. He wasn't Nadal or Djokovic. That was kind of their game. But he could do it, especially against players who were not so great. He could drop shot. He could lob. He could play with incredible spin. He could hit the ball flat and fast. He could just do it all. And this presented a challenge for opponents who never knew what to expect. Usually you go in, you're going to play Rafael Nadal, and who's, one of the other greats. And with Nadal, you say, okay, I know what to expect. It's almost impossible to beat, but I know how he's going to beat me, basically. But Novak Djokovic, another future rival of Federer, would later say this. He's talking about playing the various great players. And he said, Roger is the most unpredictable of all of them. He has so much talent, and he can play any shot. I think the worst thing for any tennis player, any athlete to deal with is unpredictability, not knowing what is coming next. That is what Roger possesses, that variety in his game. And so that is what plays with your mind. What is coming next? Okay? So that's his game. That is how, from 2004 to 2007, he is dominating so thoroughly. Just with everything, you never know what to expect from him. So he becomes world number one in February of 2004 and held that spot for a record 237 consecutive weeks. Okay, that is 4.5 years that he is the number one ranked. There's like no number two guy in those 4.5 years who sometimes peaks up into number one. No, it is just Federer for almost half a decade. By 2006 to 2007, at the height of his powers, some feared that Federer's dominance was making men's tennis boring. Basically, he's winning too much. He's winning too easily. We're going to these tournaments. We know what's going to happen. Federer's going to win at the end. But in hindsight, that period, which now people call the Federer Era, is fun because it's rare to see someone so dominant over the game. Importantly, however, a new challenge was already looming, one that would bring out some of Federer's greatest qualities and make the sport more exciting than ever. Enter Rafael Nadal. Just as Federer was solidifying his reign, a young Spanish phenom named Rafael Nadal emerged on the scene. Nadal was everything Federer wasn't. Stylistically, they were opposites. He was a left-handed baseliner with raging intensity, grinding every point with fist pumps and bellows. Where Roger was loose and fluent, Rafa was coiled and relentlessly ferocious. Roger could play any style, but he preferred aggressive attacking tennis that ended points quickly. Nadal preferred grinding defensive tennis that made points last for a lifetime until he slowly strangled the life out of your tennis game. And from their very first meeting, Nadal proved to be Federer's toughest rival. In 2004, 17-year-old Nadal shocked Federer in their first match. Soon Nadal was dominating Federer on clay courts, notably at the French Open, where Nadal beat Roger in the finals or semifinals every year from 2005 to 2008. Federer was still basically invincible on grass and on hard courts, but he just could not crack the code against Rafa on clay. And part of this is that Nadal had one perfect shot to exploit Federer's weakness, which at this point was his backhand, right? Because Nadal is left-handed, and he has this incredible forehand with otherworldly amounts of spin. I mean, Federer can put a lot of spin on his forehand, but Nadal is kind of in another world. He has this crazy grip that he just whips it and just spins it like crazy. And so that heavy topspin is really tough to control. And so coming to Federer's backhand, where he's hitting it with one hand, already has trouble controlling it, that was just a really difficult matchup for Federer. And the fact that, when the game slowed down on clay, that really suited Nadal's style. Roger couldn't crack it. So these years, from 2005, really onwards, actually for the next 15 years, it's one of the great, it's the great rivalry in tennis history. Federer usually, though not always, got the better of Nadal on grass and hard courts, while Nadal owned the clay against Federer and everyone else. I mean, basically he aged out. No one, I think it's safe to say Nadal's pushing 40 now. No one ever beat him on clay, ever in his career. This rivalry was good for both of them. It forced both of them to improve and was great for the sport of tennis. This is the thing that everyone wanted to watch. Nadal would later say, to have somebody in front of you, it is easier to see the things you need to improve. And he credited Federer with fueling his own evolution. Federer agreed. He said, because of Rafa, maybe I achieved less, but at the same time, I feel like he made me a better player. Okay. And so they were always kind of one-upping each other, coming up with new wrinkles to their game to try and get on top of the other one, and then having to figure out a way to respond to those developments. As Federer put it in a joint interview with Nadal, they're sitting next to each other, and he says that a great rival like Nadal uncovers you. They undress you. They expose every weakness. And Nadal chimed in, exactly. So eventually there would be other challengers, especially Andy Murray and Novak Djokovic. But between 2006 and 2008, it's basically the Federer and Nadal show. They were basically always clashing. And it's not just at the French, where Nadal dominated, but increasingly Nadal, early on, he's regarded as a clay court specialist, but he's a great tennis player and is able to figure it out on grass and on hard court as well. The 2008 Wimbledon final, which Nadal actually won in a 5-set thriller, that's widely regarded as probably the greatest tennis match in history. Actually, the other match that kind of people bring up as the greatest match of all time is the 2018, I think, Wimbledon final between Federer and Djokovic. Federer also lost that one. Kind of heartbreaking that he played in both of the greatest matches of all time and he lost both of them. And actually in this one in 2008, this is, he loses its heartbreaker, and this is the first time in almost 5 years that Federer was knocked off the number one ranking and Nadal gained that number one ranking. He seemed human once again. He's still great, obviously. It's him and Nadal, but he's beatable at least by someone. In 2009, Nadal has to pull out of the French Open. His knees give out. And so Federer wins his first and only French Open title, completing the coveted career Grand Slam. Okay, a career Grand Slam means that he has won Wimbledon, US Open, the Australian Open, and the French Open. A month after that, he wins Wimbledon again, surpassing Pete Sampras's record for his 15th major title. Okay, so already, this is 2009. He's in his kind of mid to late 20s, and he's already regarded as the greatest tennis player of all time. He has more majors than anyone else in history. Still, Nadal and increasingly a third rival, Novak Djokovic, were closing in. Djokovic is the winningest tennis player in history. He's Serbian, total prodigy. He had looked up to Federer when he was young, but by the early 2010s, he became arguably Federer's bigger nemesis. He was regularly beating both Federer and Nadal. Djokovic's style is more similar. I guess it's kind of a blend of Federer and Nadal. It's like Nadal's substance with Federer's style, okay? He moves very fluidly, kind of how Federer does. I actually find his game very pleasing and easy to watch. But he plays more defensively, kind of like Nadal does. He's a great counterpuncher. It seems like you've got him on the defensive, and then all of a sudden he's hitting a winner with it. He's like a Mr. Gumby. He's incredibly flexible. He's stretching all the time. And that flexibility gives him this strength to hit balls from odd positions and still generate power from those odd positions. I think what's so fun about the Nadal-Djokovic-Federer rivalry is that all three of them have these wildly different styles. If you had to make non-human comparisons, Federer is the lion. Okay, he's athletic, he's graceful, he's relaxed. He's born to win, born to rule. All right. He is like just the born champion. By contrast, Nadal is the Spanish bull, right? He's tough, he's fierce, he's determined to the point where it's like almost a pathology. He grinds out points with this unbelievable endurance and just grit. And Djokovic is a machine. No weakness, unbelievably consistent, few flashy winners. He will just wear you down with sheer consistency until you beat yourself. It's not uncommon to see people having like existential crises when they're facing Novak Djokovic. He's just a machine. He seems inhuman. You can't find a way to rattle him or beat him. You saw this in the Olympics when he beat Alcaraz for the gold medal. And Djokovic is aging, okay? He's not what he once was. And so at this point, Alcaraz has the stronger forehand, the stronger backhand, the better serve, the better volley. He's faster, he's stronger, he's better at everything than Novak Djokovic. He is better at everything. And yet, Djokovic is just a machine. He never loses concentration. And so basically, Alcaraz is still young. He's going to be a great champion. But in this Olympics final, he's just kind of up and down. He's concentrated, he's locked in, then he's losing his concentration, and Djokovic just never wavers. And that unbelievable consistency is what allowed him to beat a player who's basically better than him at everything at this point. And Djokovic won the gold medal. Okay, so those are the three players. Nadal, Djokovic, Federer. Okay, so that's the three of them. They come to be known as the big three. And they're really unchallenged. For a little bit, there is Andy Murray. And for like a flash in the pan for a second, there's this guy, Juan Martín del Potro, but then he gets a major wrist injury and it's never the same. But really, for the better part of a decade, it's just those three players. There was some amazing stat when Alcaraz and Sinner played it was like the Wimbledon and French Open final like last year. It was the first time that there had been a Grand Slam final in which Federer, Nadal, or Djokovic had not appeared since it was like 2003. Okay, it was like for 20 years, one of those guys was in the final of every Grand Slam tournament. Okay, so they have this great rivalry all throughout the 2010s. However, increasingly, the big three is kind of a misnomer. I mean, it's really a big two. In 2009, Federer wins the French Open and Wimbledon. In 2010, he wins the Australian Open. In 2011, he doesn't win any majors. In 2012, he wins Wimbledon. Okay? So you can see like the number of majors is going down, but in 2012, he does win Wimbledon. And then in 2013, no majors. 2014, no majors. 2015, no majors. 2016, no majors. Okay? So by 2017, things seem pretty bleak. He just had an injury. He's coming off an injury. He's ranked number 16 in the world. He's now 35 years old, older than any Grand Slam champion since 1970. Okay? And it's been 5 years since he had won a major. People are still referring to the big three, but it's like Federer has not beat Nadal or Djokovic on the biggest stage in half a decade. Add to that the fact that, he's 35 years old. His health is not getting better. His knees are increasingly giving him problems, and his back is increasingly giving him problems. In fact, he missed the back half of the 2016 season with a back injury. Okay, so this is the part of the sports movie where it looks over for the old grizzled veteran. His glory days are behind him. I remember reading articles at the time that Federer should just retire to preserve his mystique and reputation. It's embarrassing to see him dropping in the rankings and increasingly getting beaten by young up-and-comers and journeymen. I mean, he was losing genuinely shocking matches at this point. Forget Nadal and Djokovic. He was having trouble beating just other top 25 players. All right. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit for this sports movie moment, but I mean, because he did still make finals and semifinals. But really, I mean, at this point, he's basically always losing to Djokovic and Nadal, and occasionally was dropping truly shocking matches to other, non-great players. But the point still remains, and people really did believe that he had just been surpassed by Djokovic and Nadal, and his best days were behind him. Now, you can imagine where I'm going with this, right? So to explain his comeback, we need to go back a bit. In 2015, things were going so poorly, they started trying a new tactic, a kind of desperate one. And this came to be known as saber. Okay, and what saber is on returns, he would charge the serve, returning nearly from the service line. All right, so if you know a tennis court, okay, you got a tennis court, the service line is the line in the middle where you have to serve the ball in front of that line, right? And so he's charging basically up to the service line, and when the serve comes, he's just hitting a little half volley back to the server. It's called saber because it stands for Sneak Attack by Roger, S-A-B-R, saber. And usually when you return, you're sitting behind the baseline or at the baseline, waiting for the ball to come to you because serves come quite fast. To be able to come up to the service line, it shows what great hand-eye coordination he had, and also kind of how desperate he was. That he's getting older, he wants to end points quickly, and so he's trying this kind of desperate tactic. It actually doesn't work that well. He loses most of the points when he tries saber, but he basically uses it as a psychological shock tactic, okay? Because people found it so disruptive and shocking that then it's in their head when they're serving. Oftentimes he comes up, he does saber, doesn't necessarily work out, he gets beat on the point, but then they double fault the next serve because they're just thinking about, okay, what's he going to do on my serve? Okay. Eventually he abandons it. It's just too risky. He loses too many points doing saber. So since he abandons it, why do I bring this up? Well, because here's the thing about saber. When you have to take such quick, short balls on the serve, you have to shorten your swing and hit the ball further out in front, right? The ball's coming incredibly fast. You don't have time to wait on it and take a full swing. You just kind of do a short little swing. Well, saber is one of the things that transforms Federer's backhand. Because he's doing this, he learns to hit the backhand with a shorter backswing. And because of that, it becomes more efficient and becomes more consistent. That was always his problem, the consistency of his backhand. He was also helped by a new racket with a larger head, which once again gives him a little bit less control, but makes things more consistent. And by a new coach named Ivan Ljubicic. Ivan was a Croatian former player who had actually played Federer early in his career, and they had a little bit of a rivalry. When Federer was trying out new coaches, Ljubicic suggested that he would do two things differently. He would keep Federer tight on the baseline in rallies and take balls on the short hop to stay aggressive. All right, so usually if your opponent hits a deep ball that lands near the baseline, you're going to back up a little bit to have more room to hit it. And Ljubicic says, no, you should just stay tight and just take it on the short hop. Just boom, boom, hit it back so that you can stay aggressive. And the other thing that he favored was hitting more topspin backhands. Usually at this point, he's slicing the backhand to just play defense on the backhand side. And Ljubicic says, no, I think you're going to have more success staying aggressive and hitting hard attacking backhand shots. Okay, so he hires him as his coach, and they implement this strategy. And look, we have talked before about how the best strategy is to focus on your strengths rather than shoring up your weaknesses. This is actually an interesting case study because, in a way, it's both, right? Federer's strength was his aggressive attacking style of tennis, his shot making. That was where he was most comfortable and could do the most damage. At the same time, his backhand was a weakness, and they were going to be working on making it more consistent. So maybe it was working on a weakness. At the same time, I guess, I would say that it was still working on a strength because his backhand was a strength. It was one of the greatest and most impressive shots of all time. It just wasn't very consistent. One of his early coaches, Darren Cahill, actually said as much, quoting now from the master. Cahill told Carter that Federer's forehand and movement were impressive. But I said, mate, that backhand you're going to have to do some work, because that looks like it might be something that could hold him back. Cahill told me that he would have viewed that practice session through a different lens later in his coaching career. It's where coaches go wrong a lot, because we spend too much time looking for the areas that are bad or average, Cahill said, and then we concentrate on those areas too much instead of working on strengths. So that was kind of me as an early coach. I was looking for areas that were going to hold him back, and I ignored a little bit the stuff that was going to make him great. Okay. So, whether you view it as working on a strength or working on a weakness, Ljubicic helps Federer to just hit the backhand with confidence. Okay, you're going to miss some, but we have to be able to attack with the backhand, and so we're going to put topspin on it, and we're going to stick with it, and that gives him confidence. Okay, so what was the result? Well, in 2017, to look at the first result, we have to look at the Australian Open, because that is the first tournament of the year. It's held in January. All the other Grand Slams, the US Open, the Wimbledon, the French Open, are all held in the summer, but the Aussie is held in the Australian summer, so in January. All right. So 2017, January, Australian Open. For once, the limelight was not on Federer. Not only was his career on the downswing, but he was just returning from a back injury, and so there were no expectations for this 17th ranked 35-year-old Roger Federer. Things did not look more encouraging when he dropped a set against the unranked qualifier Jürgen Meltzer in the first round. In the second round, he finds his footing a little bit, beating unranked American Noah Rubin. In the third round, because he was not ranked very highly, he has a very tough match. He faces the 10th ranked Tomas Berdych, a Czech player, and beats him in straight sets. And this is the first time that people start saying, well, that's interesting. This looks like old Federer. What's going on here? In the fourth round, he was up against the 5th ranked player, Japanese player Kei Nishikori. And this is the exact type of player that could give Federer fits. All right. He was very fast. He played defensively. He played behind the baseline. He's sort of a Nadal light type player. And sure enough, Federer at times struggled against Nishikori. And where in the previous year or two he might have surrendered to playing Nishikori's style of baseline tennis, he continued attacking and was able to pull out the victory in 5 sets. In the quarterfinals, he beats German Misha Zverev. In the semifinals, he faced his fellow countryman Stan Wawrinka, who at first he jumped out to a comfortable 2-set lead. So Federer is leading 2-0, but then Federer's demons started to come out and he dropped the next 2 sets to Wawrinka. So again, I talk about his demons. Roger is a great champion, but he is known for blowing big matches. In fact, he has lost more than 20 matches in which he had match point. Okay, match point means if you win this point, you win the whole match. And he's had over 20 of those where he had the chance to win the match if he just wins 1 point and then somehow goes on to lose. Djokovic and Nadal both have lost less than 10 matches in that style. Okay, so he really does have a tendency to blow it in big moments in some of these big matches. And no one really knows why this is. I think the most compelling explanation that I have seen is that Federer is an attacking player who likes to win by hitting winners. But in these very tense, high-stakes situations, the safe thing to do is settle back and play defensive tennis and let your opponent let his nerves get to him and make the mistake. And people like Djokovic and Nadal can do this because they are great defensive players. But for Federer, this change in styles negatively affects his game. Okay, I can believe that. Or maybe it's just that he's such an emotional player that his emotions get the best of him. Who knows? But for whatever reason, he has this tendency to choke in big moments. The important thing is, in 2017 against Stan Wawrinka, Federer returned to aggressive attacking tennis in the 5th set and was able to pull out the match, which sets up a showdown in the championship with his ultimate rival, Rafael Nadal. It's one of the most anticipated finals of all time. It was a big comeback for Nadal too. Similarly, Nadal had been struggling with some injuries, especially to his wrist. And so he had been out of it for a little bit as well. So this is, neither of them were expected to make the final. And now it's like a throwback. Federer and Nadal both playing well in the final of a Grand Slam tournament. Okay, huge anticipation. I remember waking up at like 3 or 4 in the morning to turn on the TV and watch it. Huge anticipated match. Very exciting. Federer comes out firing on all cylinders, and he takes the first set. but Nadal punched back and took the second. In the third set, Federer looked incredibly comfortable. It's like this new attacking style of tennis, it has Nadal figured out. Federer has made an adjustment that Nadal just can't match up with. And so he wins the third set 6-1, okay, very comfortably. It seems like at this point, all right, Federer's cruising. He's got the answer for Nadal finally after all these years. And then Nadal just entered another stratosphere. Federer was hitting what should have been clean winners. And Nadal, with his unbelievable grit and speed, was just not only getting there, not only returning these balls that should be winners, but counterattacking and hitting winners of his own off of them. I mean, it was something to behold. And against this onslaught, Federer starts to buckle. He drops the fourth set 6-3. In the fifth set, the onslaught continued. Nadal was just playing confident, brutal, suffocating tennis. And Federer was tentative, was making mistakes. It looked like he expected Nadal to win. He expected to lose, frankly. So I haven't explained this for you non-tennis fans. You're expected to win your serve. You have the advantage in serving. And so a break means that you win while the other person is serving. Okay? So to open the fifth set, this is the fifth and deciding set, and Nadal breaks Federer's serve and then consolidates, and then he ends up going up 3-1. And so at this point, I remember I'm watching this at 4 a.m. At this point, it's probably like 4:30 in the morning. And you just feel like, oh, here we go again. Nadal is about to blow another big match to Nadal. Nadal's just too much. And it's just so heartbreaking. I remember thinking, I can't believe I woke up in the middle of the night to watch this. It was this great chess match. They're going back and forth. This is actually unlike any match they had played before because, typically it was Nadal with his forehand attacking Federer's backhand. Well, now this backhand, still a little inconsistent. He'll miss it sometimes, but this backhand topspin shot had become a real asset, and he was using it incredibly effectively. And so actually what was happening was Nadal was killing Federer with up-the-line forehands, and Federer was attacking Nadal's forehand with his cross-court backhand. It was like a topsy-turvy world. Nothing was as it was supposed to be, but one thing was the same. Federer was close, but was once again going to lose to his biggest rival on one of the biggest stages possible. And I can just remember that feeling. I'm sure not only did I feel it, but all the Federer fans in Rod Laver Arena are all thinking the same thing. Here we go again. I can't believe it. But then something happened. Federer went nuclear. Everything started working for him. And importantly, he didn't try to change the way he played. If anything, he kept the same mentality, the same style. He stayed confident. He just started going back to what was working for him, which was being as aggressive as possible. He starts hitting the ball even harder and getting more aggressive. His nerves still got the best of him at times, and he did make some errors, but he hit even more winners. Federer later said about it, "I told myself to play free. You play the ball, you don't play the opponent. Be free in your head, be free in your shots, go for it. The brave will be rewarded here. I didn't want to go down just making shots, seeing forehands rain down on me from Rafa." The most memorable point was in the 8th game of the 5th set. Nadal and Federer played their longest point of the match, 26 shots. Federer ends up taking a Nadal cross-court backhand and redirecting it down the line for a winner. I'll actually show that here. If you're not watching on YouTube or Spotify, you can go over there. I've got the video there. So Federer, down 1-3 in the final set, would win the next 5 games and win the 5th set 6-3 to take the match, the championship, and his first major in 5 years. This victory ignited a late surge. The rejuvenated Federer went on to have a stellar 2017 season, winning Wimbledon for the 8th time, a new record, without dropping a single set. He even flipped the script in his head-to-head with Nadal, winning 7 out of their next 8 matches from 2017 onward by using that aggressive backhand strategy. In early 2018, Federer won the Australian Open again, his 20th Grand Slam title, and shortly after returned to the #1 world ranking, becoming the oldest man ever to hold the top spot in the Open era at 36 years old. As Christopher Clarey noted, it was one of the best late career runs in any sport, with Federer winning 3 of the 4 Grand Slams he played after coming back, bringing his total to a nice round 20. The old man was back at the summit and doing it his way, playing attacking, vibrant tennis that thrilled crowds. He often said he was playing for fun because he still loved it, not because he needed more trophies. And that love was evident on court. He looked relaxed, smiling between points, interacting with the crowd. The byproduct of playing for the love of the game was actually excellent results. And I think this is just emblematic of Federer as a whole. I think this is the best tennis he ever played, frankly. He was not as athletic as he was in his early 20s, but his game was more complete, and his mental game was better than ever. He was just more relaxed, more joyful than he had ever been. He always was that, right? But it was like accentuated in his late career, more joyful than ever. He did have his most devastating loss of his career during this time period as well. It was the 2019 Wimbledon final. He had match point against Novak Djokovic. Actually, in his first match point, Djokovic hits this unbelievable return for a winner, and Federer goes on to lose, just a crushing. It is one of the great tennis matches of all time, but it was so painful to see him lose it. He later said that while it hurt, it's all good. It was part of the sport, and Federer, of course it hurt, but at this point he had nothing left to prove. Everyone had thought his career was over anyway. And it was kind of all gravy at this point in his career. He was having fun. After that near miss, Federer played sparingly. In 2020, he had knee surgery, and then the COVID-19 pandemic hit, derailing the tour for months. Federer would make one last attempt to return in 2021 at age 39. He played a few tournaments. He reached the Wimbledon quarterfinals, but the knee that he had just had surgery on gave out again, requiring yet more surgeries. And so in September 2022, Federer announced his retirement from professional tennis. Fittingly, he chose to say goodbye at a tournament of his own creation, the Laver Cup, an exhibition team event that he helped create. The tournament was Europe versus the world. And so you had these two teams, and it's a really fun tournament because you can see Federer playing doubles with Nadal. You can see Djokovic coaching Federer, Federer coaching Djokovic. It has all these really fun matchups. It's a tournament that perfectly encapsulates Federer's spirit of competitive playfulness, right? It is playful. It doesn't count for anything. The players have a lot of fun. It's a relaxed environment, but it's also competitive. It wouldn't be a good tournament if guys are just messing around. No, people are trying to win. So it's competitive and playful. It's a great innovation, and Federer helped to create it. And so for his final match, he decided to play doubles with Nadal. They lost the match. Federer's very last competitive point ended on a missed shot by him, which is, oddly poetic and humanizing in a way. But the result didn't really matter. The match was mostly just a celebration of this incredible rivalry of Federer and Nadal and this incredible career that Federer had had. As Federer sat courtside, holding Nadal's hand and crying, Nadal was crying too. Novak Djokovic and Andy Murray stood applauding. It was this incredibly poignant moment as he ended his career. Federer always seemed to be someone who enjoyed his life. During his triumphs, during his failures, he had a great, enviable life. He married, had 4 kids, always seemed to enjoy tennis. It was a competition, it was a vocation, but he seemed to be one of the few professionals who also still considered it a game. Here's what he had to say about why he enjoyed life as a professional tennis player. Quote, "You get the review right away. You know if you are good or bad. It's like musicians a little bit, and I tell you, it's a good feeling to have. Even if you are bad, it doesn't matter. Go work at it. At least you know you have some work to do. And if you are great, it gives you confidence and motivation and inspires you. So it's a great life." I love that. You get the review right away. Even if you're bad, it doesn't matter. Go work at it. At least you know you have some work to do. And it is a great life. And so I think that's a great quote to end on for Federer. It's a great life. Okay, that does it for free listeners. For premium subscribers, we are going to talk about the process of improvement, and how Federer improved and his mentality towards that. We're going to talk about my personal experience in tennis, my tennis game, as well as my personal experience with Nick Kyrgios and watching a tennis match with his family. We'll talk about why I think Roger Federer is the greatest of all time, even though Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal have more Grand Slams. We'll talk about the feeling of success, how other greats motivated Federer, how Federer became a billionaire, and more. If you are interested in hearing all that, you can sign up at takeoverpod.supercast.com. If not, until next time, thank you for listening to How to Take Over the World. Before we tune out, a big thank you to Speechify. Speechify helps you turn anything into a podcast. I use it all the time for my reading. I find that when I read and listen at the same time, I'm able to retain much more of what I read, which is really important for me because I'm taking notes on all this stuff to turn into podcasts. So if you're a student or if you're just someone who reads in order to learn and to improve, then you're going to love Speechify as a great tool to help you learn and retain more. So go to speechify.com and use code BEN to get 15% off Speechify Premium. And you can even listen, if you so prefer, if you're a real sicko for How to Take Over the World, to content in my AI voice. You can hear me narrate anything. So again, that is speechify.com and use code BEN to get 15% off Speechify Premium. Thank you, Speechify.